Kia ora mai tātou. Please remain standing for a moment of prayer or silent reflection. Please take a seat. Welcome everyone to this meeting of the Full Council on the 22nd of November. Great to be able to have you all around the table and for us to get into business. I would just like to point out the emergency procedures that we have on the screen, so please take a moment to read those. If you do feel unwell at any time in the meeting, do feel free to leave. We will not take offence, and of course we'll be able to get you joined in online if you wish to do so. And that is the same for any members of the public or officers who are here if you're feeling unwell. Can I just ask that your mobile phones be switched to silent? If you can do that, that would be great. And also for the technology, if we can just make sure that the green light in front of you is on when you are speaking. Otherwise, those who are listening online to our live stream or participating virtually won't be able to hear us if that's not there. So if we could just make sure we get into a good habit of doing that, I'm sure we'll be fine. If we can move through to our opening karakia. Please feel free to join me. Whakatakata hau ki te uru, whakatakata hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E he ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei, mauri ora. Thank you very much. So moving through to item 2, which is apologies, and we have a full house, which is fantastic. And now moving through to item 3, which is public comment. And we have Evelyn Richter, who is speaking on item 15, which is the appointments. Evelyn, if you'd like to come forward. Yes. So Evelyn, you have 3 minutes, and we will then see if there is any questions from members as well. The floor is yours.
My name is Evelyn Richter, and first of all, I would like to congratulate all the councillors. I stood for the council as well, and congratulations to everybody. And I hope you do as good a job as the previous council. But that's not what I'm here for today. Today I would like to take us back to 1991. Glenn Evans was the mayor of the day, and he called a public meeting. And it was because the mother of all budgets that had been brought out by Nationals, Ruth Richardson. I always called her Ruthless. And I still think that today, because they cut the benefits drastically and put up the market, the housing, the state housing up to market rentals. And to cut a long story short, Glenn Evans had this meeting, and we had 6 different groups. And because I came up with the idea of having a community garden like we had up in Nikatahuna, I started one up when I was living up there. They thought that was a good idea, and there were other things like, I won't run through them, but anyway, to cut a long story short, I believe that we are, I was headhunted by Betty Van Galen, who was the deputy mayor of the day, to be secretary of an organisation that they called the Lower Hutt Caring Community Coordinating Committee. And I thought that's a bloomin' mouthful, and I called it the 4 Cs. But I was secretary of that for 5 years, and we raised money for people who might have had a sudden doctor's bill, a huge doctor's bill. A car might have blown up. They might have needed a new refrigerator or what have you. And after 5 years, they said, Evelyn, we're doing away with the with the committee. And I said, why? And they said, oh, we'll keep the 12 trustees, but we've got 5 million in there. It'll be there for perpetuity. I said, it'll be gone in 5 years. And they laughed at me. And I said, it will be gone in 5 years. 5 years later, I looked in the paper, voila, it had gone. Now, I would like to see that resurrected. I can't do it on my own. I'm going to need help. But I have the ideas and I know how we did it in the past. And it's nothing to do with the council, it's nothing to do with the government, it's just circumstances. It's like this throughout the whole of the world, where the poor are getting poorer and the rich are getting richer. And we're going to have to, the only way we can deal with it is to have something like we had in the 1990s. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. Is there any questions? Councillor Brown, if you stay there, Evelyn. If you stay there, Evelyn. Councillor Brown.
You have to have that turned up a bit louder.
Evelyn, I just thank you, Evelyn. Turn my light off. Turn the speaker on. Thank you, Evelyn. I just wanted to thank you for the kind words and ask you that you remember around that time, also for that around that history is when they changed the Finance Act and when the Ministry of Works was stopped and all infrastructure came out to local government. So that was a big time of change that changed the face for us here. So now our big thing is how, and the Ministry of Works and funding never followed it. So our big question in this day is how we can manage funding the infrastructure. That's what's big. And that was a big change for us in local government. Then they took the 100 down to 60. So that's a big one for us for the change at that time. Do you remember that?
Oh, thank you. Yes, I do remember that. And for many, many years, I have sat there absolutely fuming because, and I'm sorry to say this, but a lot of councillors and mayors have got there on the saying, oh, we'll keep the rates down. You cannot keep the rates down. It's impossible. The only way you can proceed is the rates have to go up. And I could take you to parts of Lower Hutt that were not in Lower Hutt until 1989. And they were putting in, with the Hutt County, and they were putting in, instead of putting in 6-inch pipes, they were putting in 4-inch pipes. They were doing it what I call El Cheapo. And you cannot do that with infrastructure. I believe in do it once and do it right.
Thank you
very much. Is that okay for you?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Evelyn. Really appreciate your time.
Is that?
Yep. Thank you. Okay, so that concludes public comment. So we'll move through to item 4, which is the mayoral statement. And I will just go through this briefly. So it has been a pretty busy and productive month as the new council has been settling in. And I just want to say it's been great to see such a comprehensive induction program that everyone has been engaging with. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank all of the officials and particularly the Democratic Services team who have put in a lot of work to be able to put that induction together. It's top notch and been a great way for the council to be able to kick off. We've been able to keep a lot of momentum from the previous term, including a number of our really exciting projects that are happening across the city. The big one, of course, was Riverlink, with the announcement of being able to secure $98 million from an infrastructure funding from the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund. And just last week, the announcement of a job and skills hub based here in Lower Hutt. That is a major win for our city and for our people. Not only will it help boost workforce capability to deliver Riverlink and other major infrastructure projects in our city. It will also open up pathways and careers for many of our young people, so that is a great opportunity for us. When you look at the next 10 years, there's going to be $2.7 billion spent in local government, central government projects across the Hutt Valley. And Riverlink alone will look to create between 3,500 to 7,000 jobs, and that's right at a time when we actually have a workforce shortage of 30,000 people right now to be able to deliver what we're doing right now. So that Jobs and Skills Hub is a really good win, but there's a heck of a lot to do to make sure that we actually have the people on the ground to deliver, because we know that budgets and money alone doesn't build pipes and roads and other things. So that's going to be absolutely crucial. So I just want to acknowledge in that the incredible work of the Hutt Valley Chamber of Commerce in being able to secure that funding and for the work and advocacy that they are doing. Next week, I'll have the privilege of swearing in our community board members and officially welcoming them to their roles. The community boards, of course, play a really important role in their communities, and we look forward to being able to working with them in their particular areas. Just acknowledge one of our community board members who are here, Kaz Young. Great to see you as well. And it's also been a privilege for myself to be elected to the Local Government New Zealand National Council as the Zone 4 rep. For our region, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge Wayne Guppy, who was the previous Zone 4 rep, and for his work in the previous training. But it's going to be a good opportunity for us and myself, but also having a strong council voice there at that national council level, particularly as we deal with the future of local government, Three Waters reform, RMA reform, and all of that change that we are very cognizant of over the next 3 years and far beyond, of course. I'd also just like to mention, I'll give a couple of acknowledgements to people and organisations within our community, and I want to specifically acknowledge the Manaaki Ability Trust. They had their AGM a couple of weeks ago, and at that AGM, where I'm fortunate enough to be the patron, I was able to learn that 3 of their clients were recently chosen to represent New Zealand at the Special Olympics in Berlin next year, an outstanding achievement. So I'd just like to pass on my congratulations and the Council's congratulations to Laura Montgomery, Todd Neal and Connor McCarthy, who have worked extremely hard to be selected. So I know you'll all join me in congratulating them and wishing them all the best in Berlin. This is an incredible achievement and a testament, I think, to the work that the Manaaki Ability Trust does as well. We also had some of our other awards with the Regional Community Airport Awards and an acknowledgement to the Hutt Multicultural Council, who were the winner in their category, an outstanding achievement, and I know we're looking forward to hosting them in the office to celebrate that as well. And if you haven't got an invite yet, that will be coming through shortly. And to the Business Awards that happened on Friday as well, a great evening celebrating the success of businesses across the Wellington region, and a great time to be able to take a bit of a break in what is continuing to be challenging times on many different fronts, to be able to recognise their work and to celebrate. And to Cameron Harrison Butchery, who took out the Supreme Award. They took out 2 of their category awards and then took out the Supreme Award, and that was an outstanding achievement from them. So that covers it from me. The final one I would like to just mention is the passing of Bill Sharp, a very strong member of the Wainuiomata community, but also across the Hutt. And I want to acknowledge Bill, or many of you will know him as Sharpie. He was an influential, well-loved and highly regarded member of our community. Bill gave decades of service to local sports, and through his involvement he turned the lives of many of our young men and women, and was recognised for this in 2020 with a Queen's Service Medal. The Futures program that Bill set up to help teenage boys continues today, and is just one of the many legacies Bill leaves behind. And I was fortunate enough to be at Wainuiomata High School when Bill was doing that mahi. So I know Gabriel was the same, and to be able to see that firsthand, his contribution has been incredible. And I know that we all pass on our sympathies to the Sharp family with his passing. So thank you very much, and I will pass it through to the Chief Executive for your statement.
Kia ora. Thank you, Mayor Barry. It's lovely to see Council in its new formation, and just acknowledging how busy you've all been with the induction programme, which is, I think, drawing to the close with the bus tour of the city. Thanks, Mayor Barry, for your acknowledgements. I also want to acknowledge Catherine Stannard and her team for putting the programme together, and to all the staff who have contributed to what you've acknowledged is a very comprehensive programme. As I usually do, I just want to mention COVID-19. There has been an increase in COVID cases across the region to over 3,000, and in Lower Hutt, as of the 21st of November, 675. Our health colleagues in the region advise us that over the next few weeks we can anticipate a new peak of the third wave, meaning more cases, hospitalisations and potentially increases in mortality. However, the size, timing and duration of that peak and new baseline trends is uncertain, whereas you'll remember earlier this year we pretty much knew what week or so that was going to arrive. You will have seen press coverage over the weekend of the Manawatu District Council, where they have reintroduced COVID response measures around mask wearing and limiting the number of people in meeting rooms. I can report that we've seen a slight increase in our monthly reported cases amongst staff over October and November. We're keeping a close eye. We continue to promote good health and safety practices, and our channels regularly publish information on vaccination and testing clinics. So we're not proposing to do anything different to that we're doing already. We believe that that works. The second thing I want to mention is some antisocial events at our sites, and in common with the rest of local government, and my CE colleagues have confirmed this is an issue in a number of places, we are seeing an increasing number of antisocial events at some of our customer-facing sites. Just to give you an idea, there have been 50 events already this quarter compared to a total of 73 in quarter one. Now, some of this increase is partly due to an increased understanding of the need to report incidents to help us to take action, alongside an actual increase in events occurring. 29 of those relate to antisocial behaviour, which can be anything from low-level verbal abuse to intoxication and physical threats. Just under a quarter of the antisocial events are related to aggressive behaviours. There's been some elements of personalisation, with staff being particularly targeted or very specific comments and threats being made, with some of the events resulting in a police report being submitted. So, as always, our actions really try to focus on de-escalation, mental health training, resilience training for our front-facing rules. For ongoing situations of the worst type, we have issued trespass notices in line with our procedures to protect the health and safety of our staff, but that is a last resort. Work's also underway at the moment to review physical controls at the admin building downstairs, just to ensure that we can make sure that the environment is welcoming to customers who need to get their work done, that it's accessible to the community, but that we do also protect our staff from the worst of that. Just moving on to reform, it has been a busy month. Thanks to those of you who on the 17th of November joined the colleagues around the region at the Sky Stadium for the Future for Local Government panel presentation, accompanied by cricket testing music. Submissions on that draft report close at the end of February next year. So I just wanted to let you know what we're doing ahead of that. We're going to work with Mana Whenua, LGNZ and our LGNZ Metro sector colleagues and regional colleagues to assess what appetites there are for joint submissions there, but also we'll hold a council briefing for all members at the end of January, early February, again to inform our own submission, which Mana Whenua are also keen to support, and that will be then considered by council in February. With Three Waters reform, whilst you've got a paper here on better off funding, you'll have seen that last week the government announced to make some changes to the Three Water reforms following the recommendation of some select committee, and the Water Services Bill is on the order paper for Parliament today. I'd suggest that, and it's certainly Taituira's view, that the committee's proposed changes largely improve the bill as it is, albeit that the changes are technical in nature. They don't relate to the fundamental aspects of the reform package, for example, the number and nature of entities. But the Select Committee has made a small number of changes around the edges, which seem sensible. Probably the most significant of those is to remove the upper limit on the number of members in the regional representative group. That doesn't particularly apply to us. It's more significant to smaller councils. There's a whole further updates on exactly what the reform contains. We'll go through the Infrastructure and Regulatory Committee, and also to that committee you will see exactly what we are doing to prepare for that reform. I continue to meet with Entity C CEs to progress towards July 2024, and our officers are also involved in working groups. No mention of reform would be complete without mentioning resource management, and you'll see that those reforms legislation have also been introduced, not yet referred to the Select Committee, but we expect the new legislation would repeal the RMA, replacing it with the Spatial Planning Act and Natural Built Environment Act. And at some point, a third piece of legislation, the Climate Adaptation Act, although at the moment that's still in development and we don't know much more about it. So in terms of those reforms, it's expecting us to reduce our 6 regional plans into 6 district plans into regional planning strategies that will set the vision and objectives for the development of the region over 30 years and integrate planning across the different legislative frameworks. And the National and Built Environment Act, that replaces the RMA. This sets out a new framework for the regulating of environmental management and land use planning. Very significant changes, and again, this will go forward through the committee system in good time to enable us to make representations, if we so wish, into the Select Committee system. And we'll also, as officers, be participating in further in responses through Taitura and through planning networks. I need to mention fluoridation. Earlier this month, I received a letter from Dr. Diana Safati, the Director General of Health, regarding fluoridation of the drinking water supplies in Petone and Kodokoro. We are one of 27 local authorities that's now been contacted, and you'll recall that I advised you earlier in the year that the Director General had issued directions to 14 councils inviting them or requiring them to fluoridate their drinking water. This is an indication that we will be expected to fluoridate at Petone and Kodokoro. We knew this was a matter of time. We expected to be contacted by the end of the year. Dr. Safati is inviting us to reply by the 2nd of February, albeit that the compliance would be set for a later date. At the moment, they anticipate July 24, when the new water entities are established. What they want to know from us at the moment specifically is around the estimated financial costs of adding fluoride to drinking water, including any additional ongoing management and monitoring costs, and asking us the date by which we think we would be able to comply with the direction to fluoridate. So I'm currently getting that advice from Wellington Water. Then I will meet with Dr. Safati and her team, and I will update you all. It may be reading for you over the holidays, but it is something that I will keep you in touch with. Finally, no, not finally, very briefly, Riverlink, which the Mayor has mentioned. You'll have seen that the Environment Court's now granted the absolutely final resource consent, clearing the way for that programme to proceed. And a huge thanks to everybody who submitted the joint application with Mana Whenua supporting that process. Late last night, I was advised that there has been no costs order made by the Environment Court. So that's of great benefit to the programme, because quite often you would normally be expected to bear those, and our legal advisors say this is quite extraordinary and really down to the approach of the team, who have been commended in their approach to that resource consent. Just some staff issues, like to mention staff engagement. We have done our pulse survey. Members who were here previously will recall we tend to do our staff engagement survey around April each year, and we do a pulse survey halfway through where we check in on a smaller number of questions than the full survey in April. 84% of our staff completed the survey, and in overall engagement, there's been a further 11% improvement in the last 12 months. Unfavourable responses have decreased. The information will be available to you in Diligent, and I'm really pleased that 92% of our staff who responded were either very favourable or neutral about being proud to work here. There's an increase of over 8% of our people recommending council as a great place to work, and 84% of those who replied to the survey feel that their leader shows they care that we care for their well-being. I'm particularly pleased to acknowledge the progress we're making on becoming a Te Ao Māori confident council, Te Ao Māori confident and capable council, and I hope that reflects some of the work that happened in your induction. 41% of our staff now report that they are becoming more confident in their Te Ao Māori capability, and that's an increase of 16% from April. So still on a journey, but definitely moving in the right direction. And we are looking forward to our He Tangata Awards on the 8th of December, which I hope you've all received an invitation to attend the ceremonial part of the occasion, just the ceremonial part, if you don't mind, members. But we received a fantastic response when calling for nominations, with 125 nominations over 6 categories. So I can tell you that the judging panel who are meeting tomorrow have got their work cut out to get that down to the tough job of selecting the individual winners, both on a team and individual basis. Also on awards, just want to acknowledge our information technology team. We've had a stressful few days in information technology with the various different servers and things being out, but the Hutt City was shortlisted as a finalist for 3 Association of Local Government Information Management Awards. Whilst we didn't win, it was a pretty strong field. I think it was great to see the Go Digital team and our IT colleagues recognised by being shortlisted for those 3. And this is my last bit, finally. You will see in your email some details around recycling contamination. We are increasing our efforts to reduce curbside recycling contamination. Those rates have risen as high as getting on for 20% in recent months. So that's unclean items that should go in red-lidded bins, and dirty nappies are just some of the items that we're finding in the yellow recycling bins. And that level of almost 20% is unsustainable, because what that means is not only is that a problem with those bins that are contaminated, it potentially contaminates the whole load that is being collected. So council bin ambassadors are leaving green stickers on the yellow lidded bins to say well done, where people are doing a good job. But from this week, contaminated bins will receive up to 2 red stickers, and residents may find their recycling bins removed if they continue to be contaminated. We're also focusing on PR and that. So we're very much encouraging people to do the right thing, but there does need to be a bit of a prod to those who continually do the wrong thing. Very, very finally, as a matter of law, Mr Mayor, I'm required to confirm to you all that the delegations to me at the end of the previous triennium that were in place between the 8th of October and the 26th of October were not utilised. I made no decisions in relation to any of those delegations. Ngā mihi.
Oh, thank you, Joe, for that very thorough update. I really appreciate it. Is there any questions from that? Okay, thank you. So we will move through to conflict of interest declarations. So is there any members have a conflict of interest to declare from what's in front of us today? Just as a, if you do notice anything in the papers later on, do feel free to raise it. If you do think of something, no problem at all. Okay, moving through to item 7, which is the council minutes, which is from the inaugural council meeting from the 26th of October, pages 10 to 32 of the agenda. So I'd like to move the minutes be adopted. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Briggs, any discussion? around the correctness? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. Moving through to item 8, which is the draft annual plan. This is on page 33 of the agenda, and I'd like to ask Jenny Livschitz, Group Chief Financial Officer, to speak to this item, and I believe you've got a presentation. Jenny, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'm going to take you through a brief overview of this report on the annual plan. So hopefully that'll pop up there now. Okay. So starting off just in terms of the overall purpose of the annual plan. So this is year 3 of the LTP. So in this annual plan, we'll basically be presenting the proposed annual budgets for 23-24 and setting the rates, identifying and explaining any variations in the financial statements compared to what was in the LTP, supporting the LTP in providing integrated decision-making and coordination of resources. And most importantly, it's part of our accountability framework because the annual plan will set out our projects, our plans, our service levels and KPIs that for the year ahead, and we'll monitor our performance against that. Okay, so the proposed high-level approach to the annual plan, basically we're expecting it to be largely in line with what was set out in the long-term plan. So the budgets are basically what was set through the LTP process, year 3, and updated for changes that were made through last year's annual plan process. So largely financial elements are going to be updated. So things like unavoidable increases, any changes to service levels, and any other justifiable changes, we'll be putting those through the annual plan. Obviously, we've got high inflation costs that we need to deal with in the current economic context and higher borrowing costs, so we'll need to update our annual plan to reflect that. Most importantly, the proposed approach is to include a formal consultation process. So any changes in this annual plan compared to what we had in the LTP will be going through a formal consultation process and collecting feedback from the public around those proposed changes. Okay, so going through the high-level plan and timeline across the year. So we had our hui in early November where we had an opportunity to talk through the annual plan, which was a really good start to this process. Today's council paper is really the formal kick-off of the annual plan process. So we're asking council to agree the high-level plan and the approach, key assumptions, and really your expectations from us as officers for this annual plan process. On the 20th of December, we're going to have a really big agenda for you with lots of really important key decisions around budget increases and proposed funding solutions that we need to work through and get decisions from council. That'll basically inform the preparation of the draft annual plan. And on the 22nd of February, officers will come back with an early draft of the draft annual plan. We'll also have an early draft of the consultation material, and we'll ask council for feedback on where we've got to with that draft material. And then the 28th of March, we'll basically bring together the final draft annual plan and consultation material for sign-out by council before we kick off that formal public consultation process. And so that'll run through the month of April. And then through May and June, we'll basically work through the feedback from the public and get some further advice from officers around final decisions, and then get the final annual plan adopted on the 28th of June and the rates set. Throughout this program, we'll be aiming to do a number of briefings to help inform the process. We've got another one on the 7th of December coming up, which is a really important one ahead of those big decisions on the 20th of December. So there'll be lots of engagement on annual plan. Okay, so there's a number of challenges and opportunities that we've got through this annual plan process. We did speak about these at the hui and also at the briefing we had last week. Just to call out a few of them, obviously the sharp increase in inflation is our key big challenge that we've got. Cost of borrowings, that's with our big investment program that we've got planned. That cost of borrowings is really, it's going to be a challenge for us. And in the current labour market and record low unemployment, that's also a key challenge for us. Amongst all the others there, I won't go through all of them now. Okay, and these graphs here, we did go through them briefly at the briefing last week. Obviously, all the CPI, waste levy, emissions trading scheme levy, everything's heading kind of north, upwards. You'll be well aware of all those trends. And just a reminder, on the right-hand side there, it's an extract from the Burl report. So that's that research report that's provided for the local government New Zealand-wide, and they basically have some projections there around what the cost adjusters are per annum. And so where in our long-term plan we had assumed cost adjusters of about 2%, 2 to 3% per annum. What this report is telling us now is that in the current financial year, that's now 7.6%. 23, it's projected to be 5.9, and 24, 4.3. So, double or even sometimes 3 times what we had budgeted. So a real challenge for us in our planned program, and it's definitely going to be some tough decisions to be made. Okay, so the report's proposing these key aspects are in scope for this annual plan process. So, implementation of strategies and policies agreed by council. So we're not proposing any new strategies or policies. Those really will fall into the LTP, the next LTP, which will be the next big opportunity to make changes and rethink priorities and so on. Reviewing our capital investment plans and priorities is really important. Reviewing cost pressures and priorities, particularly in light of inflation and rising costs of borrowing, etc. Finding funding solutions and financial strategy solutions is going to be obviously fundamental to try and balance our books. And then finally, looking at our rating policy. So we've had the briefing earlier today from Quotable Value about the property revaluation, but we'll certainly be looking closely at the affordability aspects off the back of proposed rates increases, and also making sure that we really help our residents understand what that property revaluation change means for them. So out of scope, as I said, key future reviews of strategies and policies. We'll leave that for the next LTP. Any significant change in directional priorities. So we're not going to be planning to add a whole lot of new stuff in. Three Waters reform, at this stage, we need to assume it's continuing BAU as the legislation, there's still quite a bit of uncertainty, so we still need to look after those assets and deliver the services. And for CCOs, we're not expecting any major changes through this annual plan process. So the report's got, Appendix 1 has got the financial strategy principles. They're really important. They're the key foundation points for how we developed our long-term plan funding aspects. So, and we're asking in the report today for council to endorse those financial strategy principles again. Capital investment plan, just a reminder that obviously that's from the last annual plan. So massive big investment program that we've got planned over the next remaining period of the LTP. It was a doubling of the investment compared to the last LTP. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a number of issues now with cost escalations in our current environment, and we'll be presenting further detailed information to council on the 20th of December, basically going through all the key projects and our latest information relating to those. Debt projections. We went through this at the Hui. This is from the annual plan. So that yellow line is the debt to revenue limit in our LTP that was agreed. The dark black line is the projected debt from the LTP, and then the light blue is the projected debt in our latest annual plan. And there's only there's a bit of a, it's getting pretty tight there between the yellow line and the blue line. So we are up at, 214% of that limit of 250, and only $106 million of a debt room capacity, and that's before we add in the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, the full commitment there. So some big challenges there and some serious risks around our Standard & Poor's credit rating, depending on what council decisions are made around the work program. Balanced budget. This is another key part of our financial strategy around making sure that we've been careful around making sure we've got enough operating revenue to fund our operating expenses. And when we do this calculation, we remove out all the funding for capital projects. So again, in the context of all the cost pressures we've got, what we are likely to see with the projections coming through to you in December is that projected position is going to be at a later stage. And again, there'll be council decisions to be made around where you want to go in terms of solutioning that. And then finally, just an extract of the information you received at the briefing earlier today from about the property revaluation. So this is very much rough cut, early numbers, the unaudited and so on. So they will move around a bit. But at a high level, you can see average residential property values increasing by about 29%. So from 630,000 up to 815. The rates increase on that, assuming we kept it the same as the LTP, would be about $3.48 per week, or $181 per annum. I suppose, with all the challenges we've got around inflation and cost of borrowings and tough choices that need to be made around the work program, we will be coming back to council with a proposed higher rates increase as well. I expect that's going to be part of the solution, as well as the impact of keeping the rates exactly the same. But I'd say that this $3.48 is definitely the lowest option. It's going to be a real challenge to keep it at that level. Okay, so just briefly, the decisions that are in the report. So there's a number of noting resolutions around inflation and so on. We're asking you to agree the high-level plan and approach for the annual plan, to endorse the LTP financial strategies, agree rates affordability continues to be a key consideration, and notes we're working through trying to find some offsets, particularly rephasing and reprioritisation options for you. And at the December meeting, we'll be asking you for decisions on the balanced budget and rates increases, both a 5.9 and a higher rates increase option. And the final resolution there is a really important one. Any other further direction and guidance that you want to give us leading into this annual plan process as we kick off this really important piece of work? Joe, I'm just wondering if you want to add anything else?
No, just to signal that, we indicated this, as I say, back in July. You've chosen as a council to follow your financial strategy based on those principles, which we're suggesting that you reconfirm again today, rather than hang your hat on a particular an economic indicator. But obviously 5.9 is significantly lower than the underlying rate of inflation. If you had chosen to stay with hanging your hat on an indicator. And I just want to be absolutely honest and upfront and say that with the scale, reprioritisation, rephasing, we are looking for savings. We've been at that again today. It is highly unlikely that that alone will get us to where we need to be. And I recognise that that is a challenge when people's are coming off their fixed term mortgage rates. We expect the bank to do a 75 basis points hike tomorrow. We're probably not going to hit, we're going to hit peak interest rates probably around March of next year. Those interest rates come to us too in terms of the cost of borrowing. So it's for you to discuss, Mr. Mayor, but I think we just need to be very open. It's not far off impossible to get to 5.9, and we know that this council likes to do what it said it would do if at all possible, but sometimes things aren't possible.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Joe. So is there any questions for the team on that presentation or any of the information that's in the report as we go through it? Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, on page 48, paragraph 69, it talks about the Burl local government cost index, and it says that we propose not to take the prior year's figure. Just wondering what the rationale for this is, because obviously their indicator is cumulative of the previous year. So if we just skip a whole year, does that not mean the rest of our figures are going to be out by that 4.3%?
Thank you, Councillor Dyer. Yeah, so basically what we're doing is we're keeping it at the 2.3% instead of updating for this latest bill of 4.3. And I mean, basically it's an effort to try and keep our budgets lower. And what we're asking budget managers to do is, because it's the first year, they should have good quality information around the actual impact of any budget changes. So they've got to basically tell us and justify why they need more than that. So that's the bare minimum that we're increasing it by, and the same as what we had in the LTP. And any increase above that, we've got to have evidence, justification around why they need more. So it's kind of trying to help keep the funding requirements as low as possible. But for all the future years, we've picked up the Burl adjusters as we have done in the past as well.
So if a particular project had been more than that 2.3%, say it was around 3%, that's what we'd be taking and then building off that going forward into future years.
Yep.
Any other questions? Councillor Brown?
With the inflation constantly moving and the costs, are we going to regularly have changes in the training on all our projects? Do you expect with the rise in costs?
I suppose we'll continue to monitor what's happening, and as we go out for tender and get new information, we'll certainly keep council informed and be reporting that back and through, this annual plan process. If we get further information through the preparation of the annual plan process, we'll definitely use that to inform our budgets, and through the next LTP and annual plan. So it's going to be an ongoing thing to monitor where we're going and how we're tracking, and make sure that we're managing the risks around those cost escalations as best we can.
Any other questions? Councillor Stellinger, then Councillor Dyer.
Thank you. I wonder if this is my first question at the council meeting, but thank you very much to the staff for the thorough presentation and briefings we've had to date. I have a question regarding page 38, which talks about the approach. I'm just flicking back to it. It doesn't make a mention under the matters that are in scope of having a review of council operating costs. I just wonder why that is.
So we are doing that. I suppose it's assumed under the funding solutions, and there's reference to, finding offsets in terms of cost pressures. So yeah, we absolutely are going through that process. We've been reviewing our budgets through October. Right now, directors are working through finding savings in their budgets to try and offset the cost pressures on projects. So it's not specifically called out in this section, but it is kind of a core part of our project.
Councillor Dyer.
Thank you. Obviously, it's not a decision we're going to be making today around whether we shift that target for the balanced budget, but it is noting it in there. If we do decide to push those goalposts out a bit further, will that require an LTP amendment, or can we do that within the annual plan itself?
Yep, so we can go through, what we're proposing is the annual plan consultation process. So that's where we're basically saying, look, we want to make some changes to what was in the LTP. I think if we're pushing out the balanced budget for maybe a year or two, so, not a 10-year thing, I think that's quite reasonable to do through an annual plan consultation process, and it's appropriate. LTP amendment is more where you want to do big strategic changes, like you want to, do a massive big project or really change tact on something or change your priorities. And we've received legal advice around this annual plan consultation process. It's largely going to be focused on projects that have got cost pressure changes that were in our LTP. So it's not like we're going to change our work program. It's just the funding mechanism. So that balanced budget piece, if we need to consult on the changes there, I think it's quite reasonable, and as an annual plan consultation instead of an LTP amendment.
Councillor Edwards.
Thanks. If I remember correctly, just before we settled last year's annual plan, there was advice that we were going to be somewhat insulated from the increasing inflationary pressures in terms of renewal of some of our big service contracts for organisations that deliver key services. Is there more information? Like, they weren't due for renewal at that time, but they will be due for renewal in the next financial year. Is there more information coming on that, or?
Yeah, so for the December meeting, budget managers have basically gone through and have been reviewing budgets, and they'll basically present information around all the core services like transport, parks, sports fields. So I can't remember exactly what which, meeting you're referring to or which aspect, but we will be reporting through any key pieces that we know we need some changes, there are some impacts. Those will definitely be presented to Council in December.
Is there another hand over here? I'll just jump in with a question, then I'll come to you, Councillor Stallinger. So just around the staff or employee costs and going from 2% to 5%. So I know there's a bit of a summary there on paragraph 72 to 75, but I wondered if you could just give some real world examples you can give of the sort of situation we're in currently and the challenges of retaining staff and battling some of our other friends down the road who may wish to take our people and the likes, and what's that currently looking like on the ground?
Oh, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So as the current budget's 2.5, and the increase for 1 year only is proposed to be 5%, as I've explained previously. That doesn't mean that everybody gets a 5% pay rise. You have to look at where people start. We don't budget for roles, if you like, at the top of the scale. So what's happening now is that in order for us to get offers to people, we are increasingly having to go above what's called the midpoint for the scale, and we are, we simply cannot, and we just can't compete with central government. There was an officer who who's been here 12 months, great officer, was in the last 2 weeks offered $18,000 more by government for the same role. In IT, people are being offered again sort of around $20,000 more. That, when someone says to you, can you meet me at $1,000 or $500? That's actually, when you think about the costs of recruiting people and onboarding people, they are things. But we are talking of those are the type of increases. So even with 5%, we are not the highest payer in the region by a country mile, and nor will we be with this. This is just our honest assessment of where we think we need to be to be able to recruit at the right level, anticipating that some are likely to be above the midpoint. It is an issue across local government. I know you've been at LGNZ events where other mayors have talked about the same issues. It is particularly accentuated when you're so close to Wellington. I don't know if that's helpful, but I mean, and I can give further examples, but typically they are the types of things we were talking about. So the big thing to say is it's not about everybody getting that pay rise, and it's really important everybody hears that, staff. But it is about particularly where we, particularly around those technical roles we have, people are moving on, or where we want to recruit to vacancies, for example, through increased demand for our services through the likes of planning and building control. In order to compete in the market, we are having to pay above the midpoint.
Thank you. Councillor Stallinger.
Thank you. Just before I go into my question, I do support the Chief Executive having sufficient budget to retain our quality staff, because I think that's very important that we keep that in mind, but not wanting to get into debate. In paragraph 46, it talks about a full base budget review taken as part of the LTP, which is good to hear. I want to come out of this process that we're going through over the next few months as a very strong supporter and endorser of the plan we ultimately adopted, of course. I will need some more information in order for me to get to that position. And it is because of some of the things I observed in relation to past budgets. Now, I don't want to take the time of the committee necessary with talking about that or even being a forum to get that information, but I hope I can make some requests, I guess that's what I'm asking, of just some explanations of the movements that have taken place over the last few years. And maybe that's just an offline meeting with the Chief Financial Officer, for example. That's my question.
Yeah, well, absolutely, and that's and that offer would be there to any councillor, and I think even having a workshop session where those questions and firing them in prior for the team to be able to prepare and bring that back, as well as any other members who may have those questions.
Absolutely, be really happy to take you through that base budget review. Obviously, that base budget review was also part of the direction that council was setting to make sure that priority and resource are aligned, and you will know yourself that every LTP has a a difference over that LTP to the next one. So really happy to take you through that and go through those points of detail as I've explained elsewhere. If things like you have to recruit more planners and building control officers, for example, to deal with increased demand in the city, then you need to make sure that there's a training element attaching to that we have the people to recruit them, that as we are gaining more money through government, we have people in financial services who are able to support us in that reporting role. So very happy to take you through that. And when we restructured during the last triennium, there was a focus on keeping that within the existing budget envelope, but moving the chairs around and then looking at what else we needed to, we could capitalise to reflect the fact that there is a hugely different capital programme. So really happy to take you through that, Councillor.
Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you. In page 45, paragraph 50, the opportunity for council to potentially stop, pause or delay projects. Will we be going through that before December 20th?
Yes, the briefing on the 7th of December, we're hoping to share with you our early thoughts on that. CLT is going through a process currently to collate information, and we want to, before we write the formal papers for the 20th of December, we want to get some early feedback on what we've got there.
I think the key will be for us is seeing that information, taking a bird's eye view across it all, and whether we make some clearer decisions then or whether we need more for then for February. Yeah. Councillor Shaw.
Thanks for the report, Jenny. This question's for you, Joe. You talked about staff salary increases up to 5%. Does that include living wage minimums as well too?
Yes, it does, Councillor Shaw. And the report makes reference to the minimum, the minimum wage. I beg your pardon, the living wage, and identifies some of those increases that have taken place. Of course, so the 5% absolutely maintains our commitment to the living wage. And of course, what happens with the living wage is as that increases, you also have to make sure there's relativity in relation to any supervisory grades above that. And that is what we have found at the as we've become a living wage employer, that we need to maintain those levels, which just adds an extra layer in, but not hugely significant in the grand scheme of things, but very important to those people.
Any other? Councillor Brown.
Because our income is largely in rates, that we have to have a pen and eye over everything. But are we playing a perverse outcomes game when we are not properly considering that the job market is so hot at the moment? We will just constantly be losing staff if we don't address it. We've got to be pragmatic about that. We've got to hold on to staff, and we can't just ignore that the market, the unemployment's lowest it's been in so long.
Not sure if there was a question. I think it's a thing. I think we take on the point. Yep. Is there any other questions? Yes, Councillor Sterling. Yes, go for it.
Maybe one more final one, if I may. I mentioned this issue during a briefing, and I thank the Chief Financial Officer for the response there. I just want to perhaps ask it now in a slightly different way. It relates to the financial strategy principles on page 51, principle J3. which talks about the level of debt regularly being reviewed to ensure that it's at a level that will not restrict future council's ability to fund new assets through debt. And the sensible response I got when I mentioned that, in light of the pressures we were hearing on the budget, was that when you look at that debt curve out at the latter end of the LTP, there is a gap, which does provide some opportunity for future councils. I suppose what I'm nervous about, just thinking that a bit more, is with this requirement to push out a number of projects because of the pressures we're facing, and that being a matter we may consider over the next month, I see that pushing out and taking away that headroom potentially. So I guess I'm just asking that that will be a matter that's considered during the options that are being developed over the next couple of months, that we retain some headroom for future councils. I know it'll be tough.
Yes, exactly. It will be tough, but yeah, absolutely. That's our preference, to maintain that financial principle as it was originally set out. It's going to be challenging, and yeah, because we are going to be filling up our boots in the later period. So we've also got to look at the funding solutions as well, or otherwise we've got to push out stuff even further. So there's some really tough choices to be made here, but we do need to take that long-term view and make sure that we are going to be meeting that legislative financial prudence requirement at the end of the day. That's the most important, that we're setting out a budget that when it comes to 30th of June and we have adopting the annual plan and passing the rates resolution, that we can confidently say we've been financially prudent and done what's sensible, and that should include that bit of headroom in the debt. We shouldn't be filling up completely all our debt capacity and not leaving any headroom.
I think just as a comment on that, and that's the magic, I suppose, and what Jenny and the team will all do is how do you balance all of those four areas which are identified under J to get that right balance, because there's actually a number of them there where you could point to suggest we potentially wouldn't be meeting them based on certain decisions. So that's good, and I suppose ultimately will come down to a judgment call for us as an elected group on where we feel most comfortable. But I think it's a good point. Any other final questions? Okay, so we'll move through to the recommendations that we have here. Before I move to moving them, I just wanted to go straight to 14, which is considers any further direction and guidance to be provided to officers ahead of preparation of the draft annual plan, and obviously for the meeting on the 20th of December. So is there anything from the presentation or the information that you have in the report that you would like to see, or any steer that you'd like to give? And that's obviously a discussion for us, depending on what is raised. But is there anything that, Councillor Briggs?
Thank you, Chair. In the report, if it can just clearly cover the revaluation numbers and the impact that will have in dollar value for our suburbs based on each option that's being proposed. So we can look at each table one for option one, and this is the impact for Waterloo or for Eastbourne. So we can see that the real impact of our decision making on the day.
That is definitely in the plan. We're working through that right now. So you'll get a detailed report on the general revaluation with all the changes, because by that stage we will have the audited results, and we will work through some scenarios about rates increases, what the impact is for different rating categories, and also by suburb.
Anything else? Directional views, or Councillor Dyer?
Yeah, for me, it comes back to that financial strategy piece, and I don't foresee this happening, but I'll say it now just in case it is. But for me, that strategy is really important, that we tick all those boxes, and that the options that come back in December aren't, we've done 90% of the strategy, but these few things we just can't do. I guess for me, I want to see an option that does tick all those boxes with regards to debt to revenue and literally everything on that page, as opposed to some that maybe are a bit short. We're kind of selling ourselves a bit short. Yeah, so let's hope at least there's one option on the table come December that does cover all bases. It might be scary, but to at least have that on the table, I think is important.
I think the reality is how, if you think about a seesaw, which, you know, what I don't think there'll be is a beautiful option that ticks absolutely every single box that everybody says happy days for, because if there was, we wouldn't be in the times we're in. So the reality is about within those principles, which are given more effect to and less effect to. For example, if you, you know, IAF has given us almost 100 million towards a $174 million problem. We don't want to say no to 100 million, but what it has done is significantly reduce that headroom around debt for the future because of the amount that's put in. However, you would be crazy to say no to it.
Councillor Stallinger?
Not on 14 in particular, because I'm happy with the responses given, but just wanted to make a comment, suggestion before you move the bulk of the recommendations, if that's appropriate.
Just go through 14 first, and then we can come to that. Yep. So, any further information or direction, Councillor Brown?
I'm assuming you'll be doing this, Jenny, but can we really get it really clearly laid out from here on in the change in landscape, the changes that we're experiencing? Because even when we did the financial strategy, the world it's changed a lot. And, you know, at the start of last triennium, we didn't have COVID, we didn't have slips, we may have more slips. So the inflation has gone up, house prices are dropped. Can we just get that landscape really clearly painted out so that people, when we're talking to people, that's really clear that even in the last 6 to 12 months, it's changed. Things are changing. It's very active.
So what I'm hearing, it's really about that telling of the story since we set the LTP not so long ago, in June 2021. Yeah. And so many things have changed so quickly, which we're now having to deal with. Yep.
And for me, I think it's just the case of, and I know the team will be doing this already, but around what are things that we absolutely need to do, and what are, you know, what is that lens of what do we absolutely need to do, or if we didn't do it, we would miss out on co-funding or other opportunities, versus things that really can, you know, aren't absolutely fundamental to those key priorities we have as a council. So, and probably telling you how to suck eggs, because it's probably exactly what you're doing now, I'm sure. But I think that would be a fair view of the council, to have that lens across it and the way that it's reported back. Yep. Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you. And also with the lens over the, you know, the view we've got, the vision we've got for our city, how that big vision and how, you know, our things we're balancing up, if something isn't important, will it, or if it's stopped, paused, anything like that, will it affect the bigger vision of where we want the city to go? So they're not going to negate each other.
Yep, so each of the requests for changes or proposed changes are going to have that strategic context provided as well. So you'll get that story, and we'll also have officers available to talk through if you need any further information before you make decisions on those items.
Councillor Edwards.
I'm just wondering, does the infrastructure funding that we've got from the government and the proportion of it that we've got to find, and the work that entails, change at all the complexion of our other investments in Three Waters, and whether some of that, I'm not suggesting we need to cut back on our upgrading of Three Waters or our maintenance of it, but it seems to me that kind of changes the complexion of the whole thing. It's a nightmare for you guys to be kind of assuming that Three Waters is not going to happen when we know that's just going to completely change debt to revenue ratio, all that kind of thing. It's an absolute nightmare. But given that everyone seems to be agreed that, or the IAF stuff is going to go ahead, we're going to be investing in some Three Water services in the central city, and it's going to swallow a lot of workforce and all this kind of stuff. Does that mean some of our other Three Waters investments, maybe the less urgent ones, can be pushed out?
So I think Bruce is in the back there. So I think we will take that away and come back to you with some advice on that. I think my understanding is that the IAF fund is really growth related to enable more housing. When we set the LTP, we didn't put as much investment in growth related Three Waters infrastructure because of affordability challenges. So I'm going to expect Bruce is going to come back and say there's nothing else that can be dialed back because we didn't have much growth funding in there already. You know, the investment program is largely focused on core renewals of Three Waters, just looking after the pipes, fixing them, and there's limited growth pieces and there's a little bit of level of service stuff. So, but we can include it in the response that we bring back on the 20th of December.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, if I could add to that, I know that you'll recall when Bruce gave you information from the Three Waters, which showed that in terms of water, 60% of the pipe network, that's 420 kilometres, is in poor or very poor condition. 35% is very poor, that's 250 kilometres, and we're currently replacing that at a level of, it would take us 50 years to replace just those poor and very poor assets on the basis of what we're currently doing, which is 5 kilometres a year, and wastewater is not entirely dissimilar. As part of working through to the budget, our colleagues from Wellington Water will give us are giving us investment advice, and as part of the budget we're doing already, you know, I think it's fair to say that they'll give us a range of options and we'll be presenting them to you, but I think the reality is that at the higher level, that's simply not going to be achievable. And some people will say, and I've heard it said, well, why don't you just, given it's somebody else is going to potentially be running the water in 2 years' time, why don't you just stop investing and give it to them? Well, we know that those bodies are going to take over the investment plans of the existing TAs at the moment. So in terms of those key projects are there, if we do anything around that, then that means it's not on that entity's work plan for the coming future. So you will see that as part of your December advice also.
Councillor Briggs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a query following on from Councillor Stellinger's points. Has there been any modelling already done that if Three Waters was removed from council, what that would do for our debt ratio and how much ceiling would we have, or would we be actually breaching our ceiling if that was removed from our books for our debt?
Yeah, so there's a few times when we've done the modelling. So when we did the community engagement earlier this year, there was, you know, based on a few assumptions around how much debt we'd get paid out for and so on. So there was some modelling done then. So basically, and we've also more recently done some work when we had to make a big due diligence submission of information to DIA. Basically, in a nutshell, I suppose, depending on how much money Wellington Water complete in terms of investment by the 30th of June, when that cutover point happens, you know, it could be between $100 and $130 million. So hopefully we'll get paid out that piece. We'll obviously lose a bunch of revenue. So all our targeted rates for wastewater, water supply and our stormwater general rates funding will move across to the new entity. So we're going to have less revenue. That means our debt limits drop down. But we also get rid of all the funding costs of that capital investment program for Three Waters. So we're basically we won't have to fund that massive big fixing the pipes and so on. So that all moves, they get that problem to deal with as well as getting the revenue. So, you know, in the projections we've done, yes, we do drop our debt to revenue limits out. You know, we'll have lower debt for our other core services, but overall it looks like we land in a more favourable position. Okay, but obviously there's a lot of uncertainties as exactly how they're going to calculate the debt and so on, and whether they'll pay us out for some of our overheads and blah, blah, blah. Lots of uncertainties, which will become clearer over the next year.
Councillor Stellinger.
Just while it's in my head, I'd like to make another comment and a question for the Chief Executive, because I'll probably forget it. Connected with your comments, if the water assets and renewals are driving a lot of our expenditure over the coming years, that's going to be potentially taken away to the new entities. They'll take over the revenue as well, as you've just explained. Now, I would assume they will need to fund that planned high level of capital investment. And so their rates or charges upon our community will take over effect from us, a bulk of that increase. So would the modelling assume that we would then adopt a lower level of rates increase over the coming years because we no longer had that burden?
We haven't done sort of detailed work around what it means for us in terms of our rates increases and so on, or our funding needs post that transfer of assets. So we haven't done detailed work on that side. We've only done sort of the big picture, broad pieces. But yeah, I suppose it depends on like the transport program, what plans council has around investment in transport and various other aspects that'll drive the future increases.
I think the big thing will be that will be a big challenge for us to deal with in the LTP process. So that's where that will really sit, and that work. There's just so many unknowns right now with the reforms.
And just a reminder also for the LTP, as we indicated in the HUI, there is a whole asset management strategy around one of your current investment plans in assets. And so there's a big job for the LTP, even if you lift and shift water out around the rest of the assets that you have and hold.
I think Councillor Tupou and then Councillor Parkin. Did you have your hand up? Sorry, Councillor Parkin, thanks.
Kia ora. Thank you for the work so far. The one thing I would like officers to be cognizant of is where we're looking at potentially delaying work and putting it off for a year or more, what effect that will have on our climate change emissions, particularly if we're looking at large concrete investments. What's in the pipeline in terms of reducing our emission profile due to that concrete? Is it actually beneficial to our emissions profile if we delay something by that time? If so, do we actually need to make sure that we invest in ensuring that we've got companies that are coming through with those potential solutions? And also the reverse, if we delay something, are we actually likely to be increasing our emissions over long term? Because if we don't put the roading infrastructure in, or cycleways, etc., that we don't actually reduce our emissions in the immediate term.
No, really, I'm getting nods, so you can take that. Really good points. Okay, the only other thing I'd ask, if we can come back, and this is maybe just the summary at this stage for the 20th, is around the advocacy positions that we can or have taken around the cost pressures that households are facing in our community. We know that most of the levers sit with central government, but what options are there for us to be able to really advocate strongly, as we know that will continue, as you mentioned earlier, Joe, as people come off their fixed term mortgages and the likes next year, and the cost pressures. What that may then come from is we may do a bit more work over the Christmas break around taking some of those positions. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, we can do that. Can I just have to mention rates rebates? I think that's the most important piece.
Yep.
That there's definitely opportunity there that really impacts people that are in financial hardship or maybe struggling with paying their rates.
Yeah. Okay, so we've gone through that feedback. What we'll do is we've got the recommendations as they are here. So we'll move second, and then if there's any, so would you like to make an amendment or a suggestion? Yep. So if there's an amendment, what we need to do is move and second, and then we can do that. So I'll move the recommendations 1 through to 14, with 14 being changed to notes the further direction and guidance provided to officers, and that has been captured in the course of the meeting. Just to make that tidy up. Do I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Lewis, is there any discussion? So I'm happy to go. So if there's an amendment, we're happy to deal with that first, and then so Councillor Stallinger.
Just a very minor matter, Mr. Mayor, but I think it would be helpful for clarity. I've noticed, even amongst myself, other councillors and members of the community, there's sometimes confusion when we're talking about rates increases. Are we talking about the revenue increase that council will get, the increase to an average ratepayer, rates income we get from growth? So I'm hoping we can just make a tweak to number 13 of the resolutions, and I like the way it's reflected in B, which does state that the rates revenue increase is 5.9 plus 1.1, which is correct. But in A, it does not. So I think if we could just tweak A to pick up that wording from B, I think it would be clearer and avoid any confusion. Thank you.
Absolutely, I think that's more correct. Yeah, apologies, that was missed. Yeah.
That's the first chocolate fish of Australian. Well done. No, Councillor Brown, then Councillor Dyer. No, Councillor Dyer.
Stole my chocolate fish. Recommendation 9, is that the same as recommendation 13, just in different words, or is it specifically something different?
Recommendation 9 is focusing on the balanced budget decision that's required, and recommendation 13 is really focusing on the rates increase. Yeah, I mean, they're both connected, obviously. Yeah.
Okay, is there any further discussion? So we've accepted that amendment. I think that's no problem. We can just morph that in. No other discussion? Councillor Dye?
I've got actual discussion. So obviously staff retention is one of these recommendations, and really good to hear from you, Joe, that the staff survey results are so positive, because we know it's not just financial salaries that keep staff here. It's an awesome working environment. So just commend you for the work in that space. But you just wanted to acknowledge what a challenging balancing act this is really from the current economic context, and how big the decisions are going to be come December, when we're really balancing like prudent accounting for our city while also trying to keep rates affordable. This annual plan will be hitting people right around the same sort of time that a lot of households are coming off fixed term mortgages. And a rates increase at the same time could really be the straw that breaks the camel's back for a lot of people at that time. So I think it's really important that we look at how we can strengthen our rate remissions and deferral policies we've got, and also that piece you mentioned about advocating for the rates rebates, because we've got to be looking at the things that we can do to help the people that are struggling the most with these, because we know we need to do things, but there are spaces we can really help the ones that really do need help.
Any other discussion? Councillor Tupou.
Thank you, Sir. Just a comment, really, to say that I appreciate the having those key principles. And I don't know how long they've been around for, but it's quite helpful for me, and I think also the community see that we've got some basic value principles that hopefully we can be guided by as an organisation. And yeah, I just think they're really common sense. Thanks.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to, I mentioned it to Evelyn before about when the Finance Act changed and all the infrastructure came out to local government, they made the government smaller, but the funding never followed it. So back in the day when it was Ministry of Works, work got done, dams got built, might have been under Muldoon, but big things happened. But since that change, not a lot's happened infrastructure-wise, and we haven't catered for population at all. So I think it becomes an anomaly, because we have to pay for these things, and things have been deferred and deferred. We have to pay for them. And my request is around the levers around rates rebate. But we are also our rates increases sitting below inflation. So I think we're starting to play smoke and mirrors with ourselves. Like, what's the cost of everything? How much do we have to bring in? And we just have to start having those honest conversations, because that's what we're elected to do, or else we're back into the game of deferral, I guess. But that's my request. And times are, and I would speak for Wainuiomata, times are tough, but at the same time our economy is built on housing that gets capital gains, and we don't pay a capital gains tax. So that's why part of the rates are going up. So you can't have a bob each way in these things. Either you get your capital gains, the rates, we still have to do the infrastructure. So for me, I'm more open about what are the real costs that we've got in this term, and how the heck are we going to pay for them? And if we're not, we need to be open about we're not going to, we're just going to kick it down the road again. So that's my whakaaro.
Thanks, Councillor. Any other comment? Councillor Barrett and Councillor Briggs.
Thank you. And, you know, I mean, everything that has been said here today has been extremely helpful. But I think at the end of the day, what's going to be needed more than anything is how we tell this story to the people out there in the street. So I would hope that, you know, a lot of the wording that's got to come through has got to be understandable. And I'm not telling you to suck eggs, but as, you know, as business people, we tend to use big words and big scenarios that maybe the ordinary Joe Blogs can't understand. So it's going to really need to be spoken quite plainly and quite clearly. Thank you.
Councillor Briggs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. While Councillor Brown was talking, I was actually thinking of former Councillor Deborah Hislop, and one of her parting words to us at her farewell was, deferral is the enemy of progress. And I think, you know, we're in a really challenging context as we go through this annual plan, and we look to balance not only our budget, but our priority to actually achieve what our community needs of us. And as Councillor Brown said before, it's the reality that historically we've had extremely low rates in our city, lowest in the country. But the problem with that is we haven't faced up to the things that are really important for our city. And in the last 3 years, we've been pushing hard to catch up to a lot of that stuff that has been left to the side when actually it's been core business that should have got done historically. The challenge now is that financially, as Councillor Brown pointed out, our rates increase even last year was lower than inflation, and we're looking to have something similar potentially by our current measures. And that's just not sustainable to be, you know, not actually taking in the money as any organisation to pay for the things that we need to operate. So, you know, come December, it's going to be a big meeting, and I'll be clearly holding on to what is actually affordable, what's realistic. And for me, it's a priority that if we're going to do something, we do it well. But if we're deferring it, are we deferring it just to keep it around and not actually intending on doing it? And what's the hard conversation around what do we actually remove from our plan? What don't we do? Rather than just rephasing. I think it's, you know, it's nice to rephase and to think it's still going to occur, but if it's not going to occur, let's have that honest conversation in a month's time.
Councillor Stanger.
Thank you everyone for the discussion. I will be voting in favour of the recommendations. Just a couple of comments. I endorse the comments made by Councillor Dyer and also by you, Mr. Mayor. Those were the comments where now is the time to focus on what is the must-to-haves and really get that advice back, which separates that from the nice-to-haves, so we can make some clear decisions. It's disappointing to hear, of course, that we might be struggling to stick with the rates increase forecast, but I do understand the reasons for and the pressures that are giving rise to that. I think when we are saying, though, that our rates increase are less than inflation, we can't just look at the last year and the current year when we are considering that, because in fact across the LTP we are forecasting rates increases way above inflation. So we just think we need to keep that in context and look at the big picture across the years of the plan when we are deciding how big the rates will be. I'm very keen to see that, as Councillor Dyer said, that we stick to all the financial strategy targets that we have and the principles. So that would be no higher rates increase than we're currently forecasting. I know that'll be tough, but I'm just keen to see an option that has that and also an option that does stick with the debt targets as well as the other principles there. And then let's have the discussion in light of that against alternative options and make our minds up then.
Okay, no other comment. And so just before I put the motion, just thank you for the contribution on this as our first opportunity to start to shape our annual plan for next year. And clearly there are some challenging conversations and debate that we're going to need to have on the 20th of December and moving forward beyond then as well. And certainly my view is we do need to think about what do we absolutely have to do. And I'm also very cognizant of the impacts of our changing climate and the resilience challenges that we have there, which there aren't amounts currently in the budget, which we will have to seriously consider, and how we grapple with that. Eastern Hutt Road, as an example, and in other areas of our city. So not only are there challenges in the existing budget, but there are also pressures which I think we would all agree are fundamentals to get right, which aren't even in here currently. And that, to me, that speaks to a system of broken local government, but we all know the challenge of that, and that's why that conversation's happening nationally. So I'll put the vote. All those in favour say aye. Those against no. I declare that carried unanimously. Okay, thank you everyone. Moving through to the proposed budget changes. And again, Jenny, pass it over to you.
I'll just introduce this one very briefly. So these are basically proposed budget changes for the current financial year. The key aspects are a carryover of projects from the prior year. So there's some pieces that weren't completed in the prior year that we're proposing to bring forward into the current financial year. Wainuiomata Queen Street development, there's a cost increase for that project, so we're proposing that increase. That's going to be funded from contingencies in the Economy and Development Directorate. And Eastern Hutt Road, we've got a cost of $5.58 million projected for the current year to deal with the slip work that's happening now. And Kara can probably give us an update on the Wakakotahi funding. Hopefully he's got some good news. He was following up on that this morning. And finally, Riverlink, some budget changes, some rephasing of projects. So that's kind of in a nutshell the proposed changes for the current financial year. Okay, great. So what we'll do is we've got the report in front of us. We can go through each of the items if there's any questions specifically for them. So we will go to the Wainuiomata Queen Street development first. Any questions on that? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, I just had a question about the contingencies that will be used to fund this cost increase, because I couldn't see them detailed in the report. But also there was a statement that caught my eye on page 54 that savings and unused contingencies of completed projects cannot be carried forward and cannot be used to offset other projects. So I just wonder if we could get some detail about where those contingencies are being drawn from.
Kia ora, Councillor Mitchell. At the moment, we're still exploring and looking at the particular budgets. So it'll be a mixture of contingency and possibly a mixture of rephasing of budgets to enable that headroom, and also sort of the reprioritisation some budgets as well. Once we've pulled that work together, we can provide further detail in terms of where that's all coming from, but there's still just a bit more work to be done to identify exactly what budgets we'll be drawing on to cover the cost. However, we are comfortable that there is budget enough to cover the cost increase. And I also just note that there are some other conversations also with regard to the reserves contribution fund possibly contributing to the overspend here as well.
And just as a follow-up on that, so it would also be obviously reported through to the Policy Finance Committee to provide that further detail, Kara, when those, as that work's been done. But there's an assurance here that there's nothing material that would change in regards to what you would need to do to pull those budgets together.
Yes, that's correct.
Next, was Councillor Dye.
Yeah, in the actual detailed bit on Wainuiomata, it's got two options for us there, which I'm assuming we get to choose today which one we're going with, but it talks about no value engineering on the deck, or includes value engineering on the deck, and there's obviously quite a bit of difference in price there. Could you just explain what value engineering of the deck is?
In short, that's the reduction in the size of the deck. Yeah, so that basically is the value engineering associated with the deck. So it would go from X scale to Y scale, so it would be shortened and scaled down quite significantly.
Okay, so any other questions on Wainuiomata? Now I note I skipped the table of budget carryovers. Is everyone comfortable with that? There's no questions from that? No. One? Okay, Councillor Dyer.
It's for Bruce and he's in the room, so I'll ask it. I'm happy to take it offline if you have got the answer now. It talks about the wharves refurbishments and East by West ferries wanting changes to the Days Bay wharf. Just, do you know what that is? Like
We're going to keep moving because we've actually got quite a lot to do.
Okay, cool.
So
I'll flick it through.
we can take that offline. It's not, yep. Okay, so Eastern Hutt Road slips. So any questions on this? No. Riverlink project for rephasing. No. Okay, so we'll move through to the recommendations that we've got before us. So that's 1 through to 5. So I'll move those recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dyer. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. I declare that carried. Thank you. Okay. Moving through to the Three Waters Reform Better Off funding application, page 76 of the agenda, and we've got Bruce. So if any comments, Bruce, you can take the paper as read, and then we'll see if there's questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only thing I really want to point out is the split of the money that we're proposing here. So it wasn't quite clear. I think if you went to paragraph 20, we just had the two projects, the first and second project listed there. What we're actually looking at is a 7.7 million for the Eastern Hutt Road slip resilience and 400,000 for Petone, the Petone part of the project, Petone Community Facilities and Project Alignment, and 255 for the Climate Action Campaign. So just a clarification there.
Thank you. Any questions? Just particularly for our newer councillors, is there any queries or I think the report covers a bit of it, but around the Better Off funding process and any further detail that you'd like on that? Or it's all... No? Okay. So what I will just add in is, and I don't think it needs to be a recommendation, but it's just notes that the direction and further detail on how C will progress will sit with the Petone Projects Group, which a proposed terms of reference will come to the meeting on the 20th of December. So just noting that that's the intention for where that will sit. But very conscious, I don't want to get ahead of myself, that we do need to obviously sign off that terms of reference and that the council is comfortable with it. So that will need to happen first, of course. So I've got the recommendations here, 1 through to 5. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mitchell, any discussion? Councillor Mitchell, then Councillor Briggs.
Yeah, just briefly to say fully in support of all these projects. There's some really great work in there, and particularly pleased to see the collaboration with Wellington City Council on that climate action campaign, and that they're investing very heavily in that and have some very good expertise in that team. So a very wise move of our council to kind of piggyback on that. I'm really happy to see that.
Councillor Briggs.
It's always good when Councillor Mitchell and I are on the same page. Just firstly, I want to acknowledge officers around coming back with these projects. You really did listen to the direction of the previous council around what the opportunities were, so thank you for that. And picking up where Councillor Mitchell left off around the collaboration with Wellington City Council and hopefully the rest of the region in time around a proactive campaign around climate change and making it really at each individual's level around a business and household, and what does it mean for you as a member of our community in Te Awa Kairangi, and what can you be doing to reduce your emissions and transition as well. It's great. It's going to be an awesome opportunity to share those local stories around who's doing what, inspire other people, and hopefully bring some real change in our community.
Yeah, Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, thanks for the report. And I just want to say just how pleased I am to see that the 8.1 million of the Better Off funding's being directed to the Eastern Hutt road slip. It's been pretty difficult for the community up there lately, and with climate change and things happening ahead of us, it's going to be even more difficult in the future. So thanks very much for the funding to go towards rectifying that.
Councillor Tupou.
Just also pleased in terms of the Petone projects to see that there's an intention to build up the resilience capabilities of the emergency community hub. And I'm always supported having all of our community hubs being able to lead through times of crisis, having done that ourselves in Wainumata.
No, thank you. Okay, so all those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. Moving through to item 11, which is the proposed new private name on 22 Morrison Grove, Stokes Valley. This is on page 123 of the agenda. And I will pass it over to John.
Kia ora koutou. So this is the first in a series of papers that we're presenting today that just because of timing, we need to push and get a decision on today, otherwise we would have waited till next year. So the first one is a name change. We'll just take the paper as read, and is there any questions?
Any questions? Councillor Shaw.
By the way, I think it's a beautiful name chosen. But I just want to ask, is it, I know it's the discussion's been included with mana whenua, but is it normal practice to also include ngā haue whā marae, such as Kuranui marae, in the naming of streets in their region?
Sorry, I'm unable to answer. Kara, you able to answer that?
Kia ora, Councillor Shaw. I don't know the answer to that question. However, I can seek advice from our policy team and provide that an answer to you via elected members on that matter.
Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you. It's a question for Kara, just in clarification of the use of Te Aro O in reference to speaking with your uncle, and he had a preference for the use of Te Aro O for and a use, put it to a name of someone from the iwi, so it gave mana to that street and mana to the man, not to be used perhaps for a name of a plant if it was used for a street. And I believe you were going to get clarification.
Yes, I've had a brief conversation with Mr. Terry Puketapu on that matter, and I think there's probably a need for further conversation with him and our policy team to make sure that that is better reflected within our policy around the use of Te Aro O, and how we and the discretion around that, because there are sort of varying views on that, and so there will be just a need to be able to navigate all those views in the application of that terminology for street naming.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Shaw, just with your question again, I just wonder if it would be helpful to have those involved in the process here to answer that question that you had. So, I mean, is there an ability to maybe just, if there's anyone around, for them to come in and just to cover that off? Because they should be here when we're considering these reports. So if we could just do that. So Yep, so we'll move on to another agenda item, which will just be the proposed temporary road closure for Stokes Valley Road. Any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, this is the annual Stokes Valley Christmas parade. So we're just seeking road closure for that event on Saturday, the 3rd of December.
Any questions, Councillor Brown?
A question on who's organising it. Who funded the traffic management plan that they have?
Yep. Hi, Councillor. Normally the events organizer fund the traffic management plan. Yep.
And how much did it cost?
We do not know at the moment. Yep.
Any other questions? No? Okay, so we'll move the recommendations 1 through to 5. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Morgan, any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. I declare that carried. Okay. Ad hoc's bus stop configuration review. This is on page 140. John? Yeah, oh, please.
Yeah, hi, councillors. This paper seeks your approval in terms of 2 ad hoc bus stops due to the urgency of development in the vicinity of changing bus stop locations and then with broken yellow lines. I'm seeking your approval on that.
Any questions? Councillor Tupou?
Thanks, Mayor. Bob, I'm just wondering, is this the item that came before the Waimata Community Board back in May, April this year? I just because I was in the consultation, but I was just wondering whether it came to the community board as well.
Councillor, this was one that got changed after come to the community board last year.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Dyer.
Bus stop 8964, the gift that keeps on giving. So this will be the 3rd time now we've had a look at this one. Are we now going back to what was originally proposed? So obviously there was an original proposal, some people weren't happy, we put out an amended version, which went through the community board and signed off at the last traffic subcommittee, and now there's a 3rd proposal. Is this another proposal, or is this going back to the original proposal?
This very similar to the original proposal, but with slightly changes on the extra tape. Yeah.
And have we gone back to the people that we talked to in the 2nd revision saying, hey, we've fixed your issues, but now actually we have to change it again? Have we gone back to them?
Yeah, we have. Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Councillor Mitchell?
Yeah, it's noted in the paper that both of these changes are essentially required by private developments, by people changing their driveways. However, that the changes will be funded by council's transport budgets, i.e. by the ratepayers. I was just wondering, is that standard practice for ratepayers to be covering changes that are required by private developments, or should they maybe be paid for by the developer?
Yes, Councillor, that in terms of the cost of the broken lines is minimal, and they so from the traffic team that we prefer to keep the pending and the standard all up to standard. So it's actually cost us less in terms of operating cost for us to change it rather than require the developer to change it and then we go to doing audit and changing things again, if possible. Yeah.
Councillor Brown?
Also, that the one in Wellington Road wasn't because of development changes. They'd just done it a little bit too close to the driveway. That it wasn't a new development, was it?
Sorry, Councillor, are you referring to this bus stop 8964 or? Sorry, no, I'm not aware of that. Just refer to the.
Yeah, it wasn't a new development. It was a drive that had always been there. They just put the proposed bus stop too close to it.
Yeah, I believe for this particular one is the owner and request for widening the driveway. which results in extending the Brookfield line. Yep.
Okay, so we'll move through to the recommendations, 1 through to 3. I'll move them. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Shaw, any discussion? Councillor Dyer?
Yeah, I had very similar thoughts to Councillor Mitchell on this one. It seems strange that we just keep moving bus stops, and there's a huge cost of our time, engineers' time, to keep redoing these bus stops, which are just yellow paint. But there's also a lot of engineering that goes into the curbs. There's a financial cost, but there's also a streetscape cost as well. Like we're having to move the concrete pad and extend the concrete, and all that just leaves like a really bad outcome on the street for everyone. So obviously both of these are, well, in the report it says both of these have been triggered by recent developments. We know developments are going to happen usually years, if not months in advance. There seems to have been a bit of a lack between our consenting team and the transport team in terms of what's coming through. There's been previous examples of stuff that's come through the committee and signed off, and they've gone to paint the lines, and the new house is already there and they're painting lines over driveways that weren't there on our map. So there definitely needs to be a better synergy there between those two teams. But also how we fund this as well, whether it's a resource consent condition that the developer has to help pay for it. We, especially like the tighter one on such a busy street that's seeing so much development, we're moving it down 3 houses because there's development happening there. There's going to be development there in the next few years anyway, and then where are we going to move it? If developers know we'll just keep moving the bus stop, no one's winning.
Okay, and I think that's a really good point. So we can maybe it's one that we can follow up on to just to say how do we pull it all together. I think it's okay. All those in favour say aye. All those against, no. Declare that carried. Thank you. So we do have Machu Jennings on Zoom. So Councillor Shaw, so we're just going to go back to the proposed new private street name. Councillor Shaw just had a question, which I think we just want to cover off before we go through the recommendations. Councillor Shaw.
Kia ora, Matthew. It was just in relation to the new name of the private road off Morrison Street in Stoke Valley. It's a beautiful name, by the way, and I understand that mana whenua were well and truly consulted with the naming. My question was, are ngā hauewha marae like Kuranui marae also involved or asked to be involved in some way with the eventual outcome of the street name?
Not in this instance. No, they haven't been included in this consultation. Typically, as the naming policy reads it currently, is our obligation is to mana whenua in the first instance. So, yeah, we haven't taken the opportunity to engage with Korono for this one.
Thank you.
Is that something we could possibly consider in the future?
Yeah, certainly. There are definitely opportunities to engage with marae like Korono in Stokes Valley, Wainuimata, over the hill as well, for sure.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we have the recommendations. Yep, so if we just put that on the screen, just with the change. Okay, so that's the recommendation that we've got before us. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Shaw. Any discussion? Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you. It is just my concern around the use of Te Aroha. I really think if we start putting it forward for a name like this of a plant, we lose the mana of the name of, a mana whenua partner or mana somebody from iwi who is, a dignitary, someone who is part of our land, and it doesn't give them the mana if it's all the same. It's just, I feel a Te Aroha is giving them elevation. So that's just my thinking on that. And I don't know if there was another street, road used or put forward, or was it just Te Aroha?
I just think maybe we'll take the opportunity, Machu, is that a question you're able to cover around the use of Te Aroha and?
Yeah, I mean, certainly that road type, Te Ara, and usually in all instances, there's a practicality to that because it is probably the shortest road type in terms of translation to Te Reo. And that's simply, that's the short answer of it, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I have no preferences to the road type, but I understand that Tahu Mate was presented to LINS with specifically that road type attached to it, and that's how it was approved in this instance.
It was probably because they didn't understand what the knowledge we had of it.
But and I could be wrong here, but my understanding was that it's just literally the Te Reo translation for street. Kind of that's the use you can use. That was my understanding, Councillor. Path, yeah, apologies, yeah. Councillor Brown?
Te Aroa is also used across the country, and it's a general term that's been used across the country for and as much you said, for ease of using a term. That's the term that's been landed on in a few places. So I might have missed it, Tui, but where you got that it might be inappropriate, where did you get that from?
Sorry, it wasn't inappropriate. It was just an elevation of giving a name. If it was somebody's name, like Love, Eruera Love, it was lifting it up as a status of using Te Aroa instead of just road. And it came through just in conversations when Petone Community Board started first without the Māori policy, the naming policy. In our conversations with iwi, they felt that was appropriate to Paitutu because it was recognising a place, a name, and at that time of conversation, it was probably not documented, but through the community board, it just came that was their preference through those conversations.
Okay, we've got the recommendation before us. It has gone through the naming policy process as well with the endorsement of mana whenua and the use of Te Aroa. So I think we're going to put that on as for the vote. I think it's a fair issue to explore a bit more and to understand more. And if we want to take a view on that and having a korero with our mana whenua partners, then I think it's appropriate. But yeah, I don't think we're happy with that approach. Okay. So, Councillor Briggs.
Thank you, Mayor Barry. Just want to pick up on the point and the question from Councillor Shaw. We did have a quick chat in the retiring room before the hui. And I can understand the question and the desire to have everyone involved in the same way in a process. I foresee challenges if that was to be the case. One of those challenges are particularly if mana whenua have a view on a name and one of the marae who ngā haue whā have a differing view, then how would that be worked through and disputed around that? And does that lead to a situation where people's mana could be damaged rather than being uplifted? The other challenge I see with it as well was there's many Māori that live in Te Awa Karingi ki Tai that aren't mana whenua and aren't part of the ngā haue whā marae. And so therefore it's a different conversation as well. And then if we're talking to all of Māoridom within Te Awa Karingi ki Tai, what does that mean and how does that occur? And that's a different conversation to the process as well. So I just want to acknowledge it. I think it's desirable, what Councillor Shaw is raising around having more people involved in a process, particularly if they feel they have connection to a place. But the challenge of that being done pragmatically, and therefore the advice that comes to this table could be confused, and it could lead to more issues that have happened historically around the table that have actually caused more mamai, more hurt, rather than having a positive outcome. Just want to raise that now today.
Councillor Dye.
Yeah, I share very similar concerns to Deputy Mayor Lewis with regards to the interchangeableness of using Te Ara and Te Aroa. There's definitely been times where we interchange them quite a bit, and it would be good, I think, if the naming policy actually spelled out which one we should be using and which circumstances, and having that conversation. So glad to hear you suggesting the same thing as well, because it does get confusing at this stage which one we should be using, because there's two options there and there are differences, but what are the differences and what does mana whenua want? I think it's quite important to the conversation.
Okay. All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. Cool. Thank you. I believe just now item 14, which is the Bridge and Farrison Streets traffic management proposed speed cushions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is part of the Petone to Melling Te Autupua cycleway or shared path running along the railway line, which I'm sure councillors have seen being constructed, which is due to be finished in the new year. This did come through council long before our time for traffic resolution. However, that was before we started bringing speed cushions to council for a decision. Given the wanting to be transparent and wanting to give the community a voice as well as councillors in where we place speed cushions, we've gone out and consulted with the public and businesses and are bringing that to you for a decision for approval as part of the traffic calming around where that shared path is going to go.
Any questions? Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, I'd like to get your thoughts on the amount of consultation feedback we had. We did obviously ground sale Crescent not long ago, and we had heaps of responses from that, around 350, 400. And we had 50 people make a formal submission. This one we've only got 6, and this is a much busier road. Do you think that's because it's not so controversial, or have we dropped the ball a bit with the consultation?
Yeah, I think on this particular location, I think firstly because there has been consultation run through back in 2017 as part of the cycleway. They, as part of the consultation, is really focused on the broken yellow lines. So hence the new proposal does not change any parkings at all. And then the second thing is because that location, especially with all these roadworks, we believe that is not many people apart from the businesses they have a strong opinion on those. However, at the same time, that we have got lots of comments from the businesses, and then the council officers and engineers went on site and worked with the businesses to work out this feasible solution together.
And just one second question: have you spoken with the Riverlink team? Like, is there any overlaps here where we might be putting speed cushions down a bit of road that's going to get ripped up? It seems awfully close to the work they'll be doing.
Yeah, for this particular location, yes, we have spoken with Riverlink and confirmed there's no overlap between the overlink and link project.
Cool, thank you. Also, sorry, one final question I had is in the letter that was sent out to residents, it says that NZTA are going ahead with putting the speed cushions in, and kind of what are your thoughts about that? I'm assuming it's us doing the speed humps, and the wording in the letter made it sound like it was an NZTA proposal. Just wanted to check.
Oh, it is actually because the P2M is managed directly by NZTA. Yep. So it is NZTA as part of the project installing the speed cushions. But we, as council, that we want to work with the community on the consultation.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? I just had a general question as someone who now drives over many, many speed bumps to get home. So with the new design of these speed bumps, I just wonder whether or not there's a need for a bit of education on how people go over them, because I've actually seen now firsthand quite a few people swerving into the middle of the road over the centre line to try and think they're going to avoid it, where really actually they've just gone over it normally. They would have had a less of a bump. So I just wonder on that. And then also just the question generally with them is some of them seem to be designed slightly, the spacing's different, whereas some cars have actually been able to swerve right over to the side and get past like a normal medium-sized car without hitting the bumps, and it just encourages them to do something which is probably more dangerous because they're more at risk of hitting the concrete island. So I thought I'd just take the opportunity while this was here to raise that, and just for any because I know we've got a bit of a program, any new ones that are put in, that's front of mind. Okay. Yep. Okay. Councillor Edwards.
As long as we're raising general comments like that, I've had feedback from the speed humps in Wellington Road from a resident there who just says they are so noisy, and boy races, if for want of a better word, that use that road, get up to one, thump over it, floor the accelerator, you get revs up to the next one, thump, roar, and she hated it, this particular resident, and she wonders when there's consultation on these things where the residents are kind of warned about their downsides. Yeah.
So that's okay. I think we take that feedback. I I know I opened that up. Apologies. That was on me. Put $1 in the jar. But that's, I think there's probably just something in some of that feedback, and as we install more of these. Yep. So, and that's maybe one for Councillor Shaw and with the traffic subcommittee as well to solve. So I'll move the recommendations 1 and 2. Do I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Lewis, any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. Thank you, gentlemen. Really appreciate it. So we've been going for 2 hours, so we will have as according to standing orders, have a break of 5 minutes, and we'll get straight back into it at 4:10. Okay, thanks everyone. Okay, we'll get back into things. Moving through to appointments to community boards, community funding panels, councillor directors of CCOs, additional council committees and joint committees. This is on page 156 of the agenda. And you'll see the appointments that are there. I'll really take this by exception. So if there's anything that, any questions that you may have for either the Democratic Services team.
Just point of order,
Yeah.
have we skipped agenda item on page 163 around the remuneration? Am I too far ahead?
No, $2 for the jar.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that
Sorry, what page are we on?
156.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so is there any questions for these appointments? The only thing I'll just raise is there is one amendment, which is, sorry, 3 amendments. Okay, yep. Sorry, 3 amendments, which is 8, 16 and 17. Recommendation change to 8 relates to the timing of the appointment of the Seaview Marina, just to line up with the election and the Constitution, and also the same is for Urban Plus. And recommendation 16 adds Councillor Edwards as a member of the Hutt Valley Flood Management Subcommittee and takes off Councillor Mitchell, puts him as the alternate. And that was just an error. And recommendation 17 relates to the timing of the appointments to the Creative Communities panel, because Councillor Dyer has a meeting right now, don't you, on that. So, and we may need to let him go to be able to attend that. Just, yep, it's just the timing thing. So that Communities panel appointments will start from tomorrow. I think it's fine. Yep. Okay, the additional one which Councillor Edwards has just raised with me is we did have a cycling, what was the name of the group, Councillor Edwards? Cycling reference group, which never met basically in the previous triennium. I think that may have been the same for some time. Councillor Edwards makes a good point that with the amount of projects that we have, that may be something we want to start up, and with some of the challenges we've had, the likes of Riverlink, which we know some in our community have raised issues with, that could be a place if we have some members appointed there where we look to work through some of those challenges. So I've got no issue with that, but on the basis that it would sit there for now while we then decide what we do later. So Councillor Edwards is happy to be on that. Do we know how many used to be appointed to that? I believe was it 3? 2 or 3? Okay. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure, I think 3 is about right anyway, if we were to have that. So Councillor Edwards, is there any other interest from members to be part of that group? Okay.
If you need an extra person, I'll be happy to come along.
Yep. Any other? Councillor Mitchell? Any other 3? Is there anyone else who'd like to alternate? Okay. Anyone else interested? No. Okay, well, if that's on that basis, so Councillor Edwards, Councillor Stallinger, Councillor Mitchell, to that group, Councillor Parkin is an alternate. And yes.
So I'm seeing this is a group that gets around the table with the various cycling groups that are in our city, and as a liaison group, making sure that they're getting their points of view to council and council's points of view are relayed to them. I don't see it as something that meets every month and whatever.
Yeah, I think that's right. And we'll have it there, so it's formally there, and then I think it's up to us, the members, how active they want to be in those conversations. Councillor Morgan?
Can I ask that there's a general invite to all of us, because I'd like to go along to some of those things too, if that meets that criteria?
Yep. Yeah, that's right.
Did we used to have a disability group that was similar to the cycling network?
Yep. So what we will do with that is Councillor Barrett is going to take the lead on what that could look like, working with one of the council officers here, and that's something which will then come back to council around any sort of formal establishment of how that looks. So we just want to make sure those conversations happen first. Yeah.
And same question around youth engagement.
Yes, there's nothing here as part of these recommendations on that, but again, that's a conversation we can have later on. Yep, Councillor Briggs.
Yeah, just following on at the retreat, there was a number of different potential groups that were parked on the whiteboard, and I think having all those at the same time, that discussion makes sense rather than kind of bringing ones ahead of the other, since we haven't had a dialogue about them as a governance group yet.
So what are you suggesting, sorry, Councillor?
Oh, just that there was a number of different sector groups that were identified at the retreat and were put on the whiteboard to be parked for a future conversation. I think all those groups, we need to discuss all of them as a whole, rather than just progressing one or two of them today or...
Yeah, that's right. So if we would, basically we've got the groups in front of us. I think the cycling network reference group is one that, because we were actually proposing to can it, makes sense to sort out today, and then the others we can have a discussion about what we want to bring back to council in form. Yep. Yes. Yep.
Just on the disability network, there is already in the work plan this year a review of our disability strategy and policy. Barry Gall is the lead within the communities area. We've got the policy team on that. So one of the first things that will happen there is, as we engage to kick off that policy review, we'll engage with Councillor Barrett as the link into that, and part of that strategy and policy review will determine from our stakeholders exactly how they want that to work in the future. So, and of course that policy will come back to council and indeed the final form of how that works.
Councillor Morgan and Councillor Mitchell.
Could I ask when those ones that were signposted, we would talk about them? Would they be on the 20th December agenda, for instance, or early next year?
No, I think it's probably one for early next year. We can have maybe some initial thinking conversation of what we want to do, particularly around youth council, I know has been raised, and a few other things. But yeah, it would be one for the new year to then establish. But also we could have those conversations outside of the formal meeting process, which will probably be easier, just around what exactly we want to do. Yeah. Okay. Yes, sorry, Councillor Mitchell, apologies.
That's okay. Just a question regarding the Wellington Region Waste Management and Minimisation Plan Joint Committee. I have fun saying that one for the rest of the triennium. As our council's appointee, just whether, I notice it's one of the maybe the only ones that doesn't have an alternate member of our council, and we did have an alternate member in the last triennium, I know, because that was me, and thanks to Councillor Edwards' good attendance I never had to sub in, but just wondering whether we should have an alternate to that regional committee.
Yep. Councillor Mitchell. Yep. Sorry, Councillor Edwards. Yeah, and I think that we did actually have that conversation, so good pick up there. So we'll include Councillor Edwards as the alternate. Okay. Anything else on that, Councillor Stallinger?
Just a question in relation to councillor directors on the CCOs. I was just wondering whether the council's policy on appointment and remuneration of directors has been followed.
In respect to?
The appointments proposed.
Well, I haven't got that here in front of me, so it's difficult. In regards to, is there anything in particular you're...
So does that mean the answer is no? You didn't refer to it?
Well, I don't know what you're specifically referring to, so.
The council has a policy which outlines a process for appointing directors, including council directors, to CCOs.
Well, I can tell you the process that I've gone through, and apologies if this hasn't followed exactly what is there, but in essence, I've had a conversation with both Urban Plus and Seaview Marina around their gaps in respect to the board makeup that they have, and what would best fit in regards to their needs. Then looking at, obviously, for the council, then providing that link from a council perspective and being able to report back as well. And that's the engagement that was done, and then also opening that up to each councillor in the sort of one-on-ones to see what sort of levels of interest there were in those roles as well, and the time commitments. Councillor Tupou.
Would it be fair to say that, I think it might have been in a workshop or something recently, that it was mentioned about the powers of the mayor or delegations thereof, and that some of those appointments fell within those delegations?
Yeah, again, I can't cite a policy right in front of me right now, so all I can do is outline the process that I've taken. If the council is unhappy with that, then this is the time to raise that. But yeah, that's all I can do.
Sorry, Mr. Meek, no, I'm not unhappy.
No,
at all.
no, I know
yeah.
you're not. I'm just saying that if there is an issue, then it's the raise. I don't think this has ever been raised before in my 12 years on council.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Just through you, Chair, Councillor Stallinger, if there's something that you don't think's been followed, now's probably the time to raise it instead of going to find the policy. Is there something that hasn't been followed?
Well, I wasn't sure of the process, so that was the first I'd heard of it, because the paper makes no mention of a process that was followed. The policy does refer to a panel and interviews. I take it that the Mayor has done some interviews himself. I'm not going to make a further issue of it, but only to say that if we have a policy, we should follow it.
Okay. I take that on board, so we'll have a look at that. Okay. So moving through to the recommendations that we've got, is there anything else by exception? No. Okay, so I will move through. So 1 through to 17 with those amendments that were cited before, along also with an additional recommendation, which is 18, around the steering reference group, which is Councillor Edwards, Councillor Mitchell and Councillor Stallinger, and Councillor Parkin is the alternate. Okay, so I've moved that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mitchell, any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against, no. I declare that carried. Okay. Moving through to the Triennium Councillors' remuneration. And this is on page 163. Councillor Dyer, if you do need to go, no problem, because I know you do have your meeting. Okay, yep. Happy to do that. So actually we'll move through to, and it's good to have everyone here for this one, amendments to the Hutt City Council standing orders, which is page 168. So Catherine, if you would like to come forward, if you've got any comments. And Kate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kia ora koutou. Council standing orders are reviewed every 3 years and further amendments can be made during the triennium as needed. Local Government New Zealand forms a working group to review its territorial authority standing orders template. Officers support the majority of the changes proposed by LGNZ and seeks Council's guidance on standing orders 6, 14.13, 14.16 and 24.1 highlighted in the report. As Councillor Dyer mentioned, it's important to note that agreement of at least 75% of members present at the meeting is required to amend standing orders. Thank you.
Any questions with what we've got in front of us? Councillor Mitchell.
Sorry, without wanting to complicate things, my questions aren't about those three things you just mentioned. One of the questions I had was with regards to references to the Youth Council. It's both in the table of contents and clause 22.16 refers to the Youth Council 4 or 5 times. I'm just wondering whether it's prudent to leave that in there, given we don't have a Youth Council currently, or whether that should be amended.
I think on my advice, I would keep it there. You know, in the future, whether we're looking at youth councils, I think it's just best to keep it in there.
And my other question was with regards to attendance by audio-visual link. This is clause 14.7 in there. Talks about how members are entitled to attend by audio-visual link. But it also then explains that they aren't counted for quorums, and I just wondered, it's never arisen as an issue, but we have some quite small committees. If you think it is an issue that we should be addressing in these standing orders, for example, by saying that provided these conditions are met and a quorum can be met, then people can attend by audio-visual link. Otherwise, we might be at risk of not reaching quorum.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. That sounds good, and we can just make it a bit clearer.
Anything else? Councillor Stallinger.
Apologies, I probably should have followed this up with officers and others beforehand, but I just see if you can indulge me. I just was wondering if I could get a couple of brief comments from perhaps yourself, Mr. Mayor, or one of the staff, about the existing standing orders, number 31, provisions for tangata whenua. Aside from the changes recommending, I'd just be interested for a couple of comments as to how they have, how successful they've been in practice, how they've been applied over the last couple of years, because I note they are different in a number of ways from when I was last here. So just want to gauge a general feeling for are they meeting the needs of tangata whenua in aspects other than those that are being changed, and how have councillors found it? I don't want to take too long, but is it just a brief comment possible?
I think in fairness, the way we've operated the last 3 years is by having mana whenua at the start, from the very start of our processes, and engaging particularly at an officer level as well, has meant that there's been very few occasions where standing orders have been used in regards to speaking at the table, and there's been no instances of a vote at the table in committees or the likes. But I think that comes down to that option is there, and I think that's appreciated and respected. It may have been used in the for longer speaking time in the annual plan submission process. I believe that's probably the only time that it has been put in. Probably very similar to previous councils. Yep. Councillor Tupou.
Thank you, Mayor. And just off the back of Councillor Stellinger's question is, I think that even when I was first elected 6 years ago to the community board, there was always provision for mana whenua, and I think during your time as well, Tony, for them to sit at the table and participate. That's all. Kia ora.
So, Councillor Edwards, do you?
I'm in the same situation as Tony. It really should have been something I sorted out beforehand, but if the Mayor allows it, I've always had a problem in public comment, especially when there's only one or two people here to make public comment, that we start off by immediately saying, you've got 3 minutes. It's kind of almost sends a message like, we really don't want to hear from you, but here's 3 minutes. And there's no discretion in there for a committee chair to sort of judge that there's only one public speaker and let that person have their say, which could be quite a valuable say and on quite a complicated issue, and sometimes 3 minutes isn't enough. And I'm wondering whether any other councillors feel the same way. I know it's difficult when there are a lot of public speakers and there's got to be a guideline, and if you make an exception for one, then everyone will want longer. But I would have thought there might be room for a chairperson to show discretion in circumstances where there's only one or two.
Do you want to comment on that, Catherine?
It is up to council what you decide on your length of the public comment. LGNZ, they have 5 minutes for public comment. This council's always decided it would be 3 minutes, so it's up for council to consider if they want to.
Yeah, I mean, in practice, I've always operated on the basis, and today was an example with Evelyn, that if you have one speaker, that was 3 minutes, and then still allowed time for questions. I think it has worked reasonably well with that discretion, as long as it is, done fairly. And I think that I think that everyone would have the intention to do that fairly as much as possible. So I don't think it's been an issue, really. Personally, wouldn't want to change it. Councillor Briggs.
Similar vein, Mr. Mayor. I think chairs have used discretion wisely around that. I think the 3 minutes gives a really clear expectation to any member of the public that's preparing to come in. Like that's the time that you've been allotted. And if you may get a bit of extra wiggle room, well, that may occur. I think the challenge would be if what Councillor Edwards was saying was proposed in the document would be that if I was the only one member of the public coming to speak and no one else was here, well, I could go, well, give me half an hour, because you've got half an hour as standard for public comment, because I'm really important and I've got a good view that needs to be heard. So therefore, I'm going to consume that time. And so I think that's the challenge. I think as it stands, it's reasonable and practical. And any other altering would potentially have unintended consequences.
Okay, so I think Councillor Parkin.
Sorry, again, probably something I should have picked up on earlier, but didn't. With the quorum being not counting members who are on audio visual, how does that work with council when council decides that it needs to actually run the whole meeting by quorum? Are we in breach of our standing orders, or is there a standing order that I've missed that covers that?
So through you, Chair. So obviously under COVID and all the issues, there was an epidemic preparedness notice that pretty much took out that requirement. That hasn't been extended any further as of October. So we are required to hold physical meetings at this time.
Okay, Councillor Dye.
Yeah, just have some questions around the preface, the first page. Assuming this has come straight from LGNZ, it just really reads as an LGNZ document, like these are our standing orders. I just wonder whether we could just tweak some of the wording, and I haven't got suggestions now, but like it says, for instance, LGNZ has made every reasonable effort to provide accurate information. These are our standing orders, so I think we should just try and own them a bit more. It talks about all members of a local authority, let's say all members of Hutt City Council, just a bit of tweaking there to make it our document. I've got a few other minor formatting things, but I'll email them through. Easier than doing it now.
Councillor Brown.
I'm sorry, I didn't realise we'd moved on to when Councillor Stellinger raised about mana whenua at the table. So there's different opportunities now, like mana whenua can come as a group and participate, and that's worked really well. And we've had a couple of members on committees. We've had one committee which has been probably the hardest committee of all under the district plan. But I don't think it's a case of whether it works well or not. I think we are in a partnership, so it's up to us to really make it work, and working with who is coming to the table, just having that real effort and intention for us as council to make it work. So find out other ways of operating so that we make it as easy as possible for mana whenua to participate.
Okay. Any other comments Questions? Okay, so with that, anything that needs to be clarified, Catherine, Kate?
Just to make sure that, just for the minutes, that we get the clarification around those 3 standing orders that we're seeking guidance on. That's all.
Yep. Jeez. Okay, so with the table that is there under paragraph 5, so first of all, going to 6 delegations. So we agree with that addition? Yes? Yep, okay. Moving through to 14.13, we'll just go through the ones that are asking for guidance, and if there's any issues with any of the ones we support that are supported by officers, then we can come to them. 14.13. Yep. Yep.
I beg your pardon. I was just wondering, perhaps I haven't seen it in the context and should have gone to the full document, but wouldn't we just move into public excluded under a circumstance like that? Rather than just terminate an audio visual link if there was concern about information being released that shouldn't be on.
Yeah, I think that you could already be in public excluded. So I think this here gives the ability that if there is a view that there is risk of confidential information, it's more of a challenge to manage that when people are attending things virtually. So it gives that discretion there if there is a real risk. Yep. Councillor Shaw.
Then I would suggest that public excluded is added to this paragraph here, 14.13, because it doesn't say that. I thought I was trying to put it in context through a regular meeting. How's this going to work? But what you're actually saying is actually only public excluded where this might happen.
I think in practice it would only be in public excluded because something in a public meeting wouldn't be confidential, I suppose. But I think if we leave it there, it just covers both situations, public and public excluded meetings. Yep. Okay. Moving through to 24.1. Officers, so happy with that? Yes. Okay. And is there any issues or any thoughts on any of the other suggested changes? We're comfortable? Councillor Stallinger? Yep.
Locating it. It was 19.5 in the middle of the table, which the officers support. And I guess I'm fairly comfortable with it. But I do have a request, and that's to know that the councillors know perhaps immediately prior to information being released. So, you know, we're not caught thinking something's confidential. We get a call from the press or something like that.
Yeah. No.
Simultaneously, perhaps, with it being released, we're all informed of the fact.
Yeah.
And then I'm happy.
That's in practice. That's exactly what happens. Yep. No problem. Okay. So I'll move the recommendations with those noted. So 1 through to 4. Seconder, Councillor Tupou. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Dyer. Appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to swing back now to the remuneration. This is on page 163 of the agenda, and this is a report that I will speak to. So in coming to what's in front of us and being proposed was really looking at how things worked in the previous training in regards to the workloads and committee chair responsibilities, as well as a bit of a change in regards to having the district plan committee subcommittee becoming a full committee. and the remuneration for that role and the workload that will be coming through. We did have a little bit of a slight difference from the previous training where there are deputy chairs who are either already chairs or the deputy mayor who is remunerated through those roles, and I didn't think it was appropriate to give additional remuneration for a deputy chair role if you're already being remunerated for those additional responsibilities. So that was noted in the report. And also I think being able to secure Sue Tyndall to continue as our independent chair of the Audit and Risk subcommittee was an opportunity to have some continuity there. I think that she's been really, really good and been great to be able to work with and putting that independent lens and chairing that committee. So that's, I think, good to be able to continue with that arrangement. Happy to answer any questions. Does that cover off, Councillor Stallinger? I know you had a question prior to the meeting. Was there anything more specific that you'd like me to cover off?
Thank you. I didn't have any specific concerns, but just was interested in an explanation of any major changes in remuneration for any of the positions versus last year, I suppose. Otherwise, I'm happy enough with what's on the table.
Yeah, and I don't think there was. There's just been, I would say, some probably altering of things because we've got an additional chair role to remunerate. And some roles have gone slightly down, some have gone slightly up, but I don't think there's been anything else significantly material. Yeah. Okay, so those recommendations are there, 1 and 2. Do I have a seconder for that? I'll move it. Deputy Mayor Lewis, any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. I declare that carried. Thank you. Now just moving through to the interim delegations to community boards at the start of the triennium. I don't think we need, no, Catherine, it's pretty straightforward. Is there any questions on this? This just enables them for their first meeting. So I'll move the recommendations 1 and 2. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Morgan, any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. Appointment to council organisations, working groups and external organisations. This is on page 325 of the agenda. And is there any questions on this? Councillor Mitchell.
Just a comment actually, and sorry for not picking up on this earlier. In the last triennium, I was our council's appointee to the Wellington Regional Waste Forum, which I notice isn't on the list. And I think it fits into this paper rather than the previous one. It's not a committee, it's an external group. So happy to be reappointed to that position if council so feels just, and have been chairing that forum.
Okay. Yeah, so we can make that appointment now. I don't think I'm comfortable with that. So just to make sure the team here have got the right name down for the group.
Wellington Region Waste Forum.
Okay. Yeah. And so, Councillor Mitchell, you're keen to continue in that role. Is there any other interest?
It's a really good information sharing one if anyone wants to jump on as an alternate.
No alternates? Oh, okay. 2. Paper, scissors, rock? No. It's Councillor Morgan. Okay, alternate. Great. And I know that would be, again, be a forum where they'd welcome people to come along generally, would they? Wouldn't they? So, yeah. Okay. Councillor Parkin?
Do we need to amend the Cycleways project group from being disestablished, which is point 12? Or is that a different group to the one that we just talked about?
Oh, thanks, Councillor Edwards. It's really throwing me a... Okay, well, I think we've covered it, and we'll make that work. Yep, same group. Okay, Councillor Briggs?
Yeah, should have raised it before, and I was only kind of thought about it when Councillor Mitchell talked about alternates in the alternative paper. It may just be prudent to name Councillor Parkin as the alternate for Te Mana Whakahaere or Te Ara Whakamoa, the Climate Action Pathway Group, just in case I cannot attend.
Yeah, happy to do that. Okay, so with those additions, anything further? No. Councillor Stallinger?
I did ask a question via elected members on terms of reference for various groups listed here, and thank you and the officers for the responses. I just have one remaining concern, I suppose, or question, and it relates to the long-term plan, annual plan working group. There wasn't really a terms of reference or much said about what that group does, so it makes me a bit uncomfortable as to what this group will be doing versus the committee, which I think we're all are on, if memory serves me correct. So I don't know if there's any further information that could be added to explain what this group actually does.
Thank you, Councillor Stellinger. I can give you a quick example. So we haven't actually used the working group that often, but where we've got really tight deadlines around finalising annual plans or draft annual plans or consultation documents, and we want to get some feedback and input, the meeting cycles are monthly, and sometimes we need to turn stuff around quicker, or there's particular sort of tricky bits that we need to talk through, then we have had some call together the working group and work through whatever it is that we need to get some feedback on or a decision. And when we do have the next meeting cycle, we always report back as to what was progressed through that working group. So there's good transparency around why we needed to use the working group and call it a working group meeting, and what the decisions were of that working group. So it's really kind of a subset of the long-term plan, annual plan subcommittee to help us progress through things because of tight timeframes and complexity sometimes of things that we're dealing with.
In terms of decisions, it only makes decisions where that subcommittee's delegated that decisions to it. So, for example, finalising finalising the actual text of a document where it might be very, very minor, and then that's reported back. So in essence, the decision-making remains in the governing body.
And that would be dealt with, so it would be quite clear at a committee that would be delegated out and what it would be looking to do as well. Yeah. Sorry.
Can I just make an offer, just because it might be helpful on occasion? If you and the council are willing, I'd like to be on that working group. I think it might be able to add some value from time to time.
If we so what we can do is, if we have the working group down as I suppose the logic was the chairs of the standing committees, but there is nothing stopping us to have additional or changing or having additional councillors in there as we go through certain issues. So if there was a particular issue that yourself would be really helpful on, we could actually also include that in the recommendation from council. The same being for any other councillor. Does that sound like a good approach? Yeah. Cool. Thank you, Councillor Tupou.
Just one last thing, Mr. Chair, is that I'm just envisioning that some of these reference groups that were mentioned will be quite instrumental in terms of our consultation through the LTP, etc. So those communities of interest, connecting with them and bringing those views back to the table. So I look forward to doing that.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. So we've got that down. So recommendations 1 through to 5. Any discussion? Sorry, did I a mover and a seconder? I can't recall. So do I have a seconder? Moved it. Councillor Stallinger. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. Okay, I've received no questions. So now we move to exclusion of the public, and I'll move that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting, namely Tupua Horunuku Eastern Bay Shared Path funding, and that Michael Sazen, project manager from Wakakotahi, and be permitted to remain after the public section of the meeting, as he has knowledge of matters that will assist council in relation to item 22. Any discussion? Wait. All those in favour say aye. Those against no. I declare that carried and declare the public part of the meeting closed at 4:54 p.m. And thank you, Councillor Barrett. I know you've got another commitment, so appreciate that. Just take a moment for the live stream to be turned off.